Relays and solenoids are very simple. They're just switches like this knife switch, except instead of being controlled manually, they're controlled with electric current. Let's draw a red and blue wire going to the terminals on this switch. You can see the switch is currently open, but if it was closed, the power would flow from the red wire to the blue wire. So relays are pretty simple. We've got the two wires we want to connect, the red and the blue. Got a wire going to ground. We've got a wire that's going to go to 12 volts, the trigger wire. When I connect this to 12 volts, you're going to hear the relay click. You're going to see the multimeter go from OL, which stands for over limit, to a reading of a couple of ohms. And that's going to tell you that there's a connection between the red and the blue. Now we'll release it. These red and blue wires, this is called a normally open position, meaning the circuit is open, meaning the circuit is not closed, meaning there's no connection. Some relays have an extra wire that is in the normally closed position, meaning the red and the white are connected until you trigger it. So right now we can see that there is a connection between the red and the white wires, and when I give the relay 12 volts, that connection is going to be opened. Solenoids work just the same way. You've got the top and the bottom, which are going to be connected. This is like the red and the blue, and this is going to be the trigger, which is like the yellow. The black is actually the case itself, which is screwed into the frame of the car right here, and the frame of the car is connected to the negative side of the battery. So when I add 12 volts, you're going to hear a loud click and then a clunk when I release it. Whoops. You can tell that's a pretty big switch. Don't go away. After a 20-second ad, I'm going to explain why we use hard start relays, how they work, and exactly how to install one. Now here's a starter motor with an attached solenoid. It's 3 to 4 times bigger than the last solenoid I showed. While a little relay takes about 0.1 amps to trigger and can handle around 20 amps through the red and blue, and a smaller solenoid takes maybe 1 amp to trigger and can handle around 80 amps, this starter solenoid takes around 12 amps to trigger and can handle hundreds of amps. Yet it works the same way. We'll label the in with a red wire, the out with a blue wire, which is connected internally to the starter motor, and for the trigger, instead of a yellow wire, we'll use a red and black wire because that's how it actually looks on most Vanagons. Now that we know that relays and solenoids are just electrical switches, who cares? Well, one way that relays are often used is for load reduction. By that I mean lowering the amount of electricity going through certain wires and rerouting that electricity through other wires. Stick with me. Here's a nice fan. It has a battery up front, the ignition switch, also called the starter switch, and that big power-hungry starter solenoid way back at the back. To be clear, the starter switch is the switch that you put your key in. The wire that connects all these is that red and black trigger wire, and it has a little spade terminal at the end. If you have an automatic transmission, this wire also runs through the neutral safety switch in your gear shifter. This red and black wire carries about 10 amps, and that's a long way for 10 amps to go. Now the solid red input wire to the starter solenoid, the wire that carries hundreds of amps, is a very thick wire that comes directly from the battery. It's usually red, but on my van a previous owner replaced it with a black wire. Either way, it's unmistakably thick and has a big ring terminal at the end that screws onto the post of the starter solenoid. The whole point of using a hard start relay is to reduce the 10 to 12 amp load on this red and black wire to less than 1 amp. This helps with some intermittent starting issues and more importantly will extend the life of your ignition switch. See the description of this video for several threads on the Samba about why a hard start relay is a good idea. Now here's how we install a hard start relay. First, anytime you work on your electrical system, disconnect the negative cables from all batteries in your car or van. Here's our starter solenoid. There's the thick red wire directly from the battery, and there's the red and black trigger wire. From the factory, the red and black wire has to power the solenoid, which takes 10 to 12 amps. We're going to unplug that red and black wire from the solenoid. Here's our hard start relay. The little ring terminal will just screw to the body of the van for ground. The yellow wire we're going to plug into the red and black wire that we just unplugged. The red and black wire no longer has to power the solenoid with 10 to 12 amps, it just powers the relay, which is less than 1 amp. The big ring terminal on the red wire will add to the post of the solenoid, so we'll get power directly from the battery. The blue wire will connect to the solenoid. Now the 12 amps the solenoid needs is coming directly from the battery through the very short red and blue wires. The load through the very long red and black wire has been reduced from 10 amps to 1 amp. First thing you want to do is disconnect the ground from your starting battery and any auxiliary batteries. So here's the hard start kit from Uniworks. All hard start kits are going to have the same wire. Some of them might not have this part. This is a fuse. This is a nice kit, so it has a nice fuse on here, but they're all going to have the same wires. We have a ground wire. We have this wire with the big ring terminal, and we have a male and female spade terminal. And so here is what it looks like installed. You just take that ground wire and screw it into here so that it's making connection to the frame, which is ground, and then run the wires under here, and we'll go take a look at that. Here we are under the van. Ran these wires from the hard start relay over to the starter area. Unscrew this nut and put that big ring terminal on there, screw it back on. And now here's our original trigger wire, that red and black wire. We're just going to unplug that and plug it into, here's the two wires coming from the hard start relay. We're just going to plug this red and black wire female into the male of the hard start relay, which I probably can't do. Oh, there it goes. And then the female from the hard start relay, we're just going to put it where that red and black wire went on the starter solenoid, just like that. And that's it. Well, I mean, you want to probably zip tie these wires to something. Find if there's some, want to zip tie that on there just so it's secure, not rattling around too much. There's the other stuff that comes in the kit. There's a couple of zip ties that you can use to tidy up the wires under there. There is some dielectric grease that you can spread a little on the connections, keep them from getting wet. A couple of metal screws to screw into the metal to mount the relay and the fuse. And here is a wire. We'll talk about that in just a minute. After you install the hard start relay, give the van a start. There is an issue with, I think it's the fridge relay, where you crank it, turn the key to crank it, it starts up, you release the key, and you'll hear the starter continue to spin. So just kill the engine if that happens. It's not too big of a deal, and that's where this little wire comes in play. So on my van, this is going to be a white wire, but it's exactly the same. There is a female spade terminal and a ring terminal. So we're just going to go under here, and there is the Westphalia fridge relay, and this bottom one is normally going to be connected to a wire that's just kind of coming out from under here. So we're going to cut that wire and cap it. Well, obviously we're going to unplug it, cut it and cap it, and we're going to replace it with the brown wire. I have a white wire. Just plug it into that bottom spade and then screw the ring terminal right there. It's just a connection to ground. It just simplifies the original stock wiring. Now start your van again, and when you start it, the van starts up, you release it, and the starter should stop spinning like it always did before. This may all seem like a lot of work, but it's actually pretty easy to do. And if it wasn't worth it, these relays wouldn't be so widely used. See the description of this video for all the vendors that sell them. I think it's pretty strong evidence that people are buying and using them. Good luck.